The captain made an announcement no one wanted to hear. "We are going to die." Passengers screamed. The cabin erupted in terror. Parents held children. Everyone accepted their fate. Then one woman stood up. She walked to the cockpit. "I can help you," she said. "I'm a fighter pilot. I've survived worse." The captain did not know if she was crazy. But he opened the door. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning started like any other morning at Denver International Airport. Passengers were arriving at the gate for Flight 2847, a Boeing 777 that would fly to Los Angeles. People were checking their tickets, putting their bags in the overhead compartments, and finding their seats. Most of the passengers were ordinary people. There were businessmen with laptops. There were families with children. There were elderly couples traveling to see grandchildren. There were young people going to visit friends. Nobody thought about danger. Nobody thought that this would be the last flight they would ever take. One passenger was different, though. She was sitting in seat 17C, dressed in simple jeans and a gray sweater. Her name was Elena, and she was looking out the window, watching the ground crew loading luggage into the plane. She had a book with her, a novel that she was reading to pass the time during the flight. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody noticed anything special about her. She looked like every other passenger on the plane. But Elena had a secret. A secret that nobody on this plane knew. A secret that would change everything. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Webb was doing his pre-flight check. He had done this check thousands of times. He knew it by heart. He checked the instruments. He checked the fuel. He checked the engines. He checked the weather. Everything was fine. The weather was clear. The winds were light. It was going to be a smooth flight. Captain Marcus was 52 years old. He had been flying commercial aircraft for 23 years. He had flown across 5 continents. He had logged over 18,000 hours of flying time. He had faced engine failures. He had faced severe weather. He had faced hydraulic malfunctions. And he had solved every problem. He was a respected pilot. He was trusted. He knew what he was doing. First Officer Sarah Chen was also in the cockpit. She was 29 years old. She had been flying commercial aircraft for only 4 years. But she was skilled. She was smart. She was calm under pressure. She and Captain Marcus worked well together. They had flown many flights together. They knew how to cooperate when problems arose. "All systems normal," Sarah said as she completed her check. "Good," Captain Marcus said. "We are ready for departure." The flight attendants checked the cabin one more time. James Morrison was the lead flight attendant. He had worked for the airline for 15 years. He had helped hundreds of thousands of passengers. He had been trained to handle emergencies. But he never thought he would face a real emergency. The training was just something you had to do. Real emergencies did not happen very often. Flying was safe. Very, very safe. At 8:47 a.m., the plane pushed back from the gate. The engine started. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. Passengers looked out the windows, watching the ground move beneath them as the plane moved toward the runway. At 9:02 a.m., the plane took off. The nose lifted up. The wheels left the ground. The plane climbed into the sky. Soon they were at 10,000 feet. Then 20,000 feet, then 30,000 feet. The plane continued to climb. At 35,000 feet, the pilot leveled off. The plane was now cruising. The flight was smooth. Everything was normal. Elena was reading her book. She had put it in her lap and was looking out the window at the landscape below. She was thinking about her past. She was thinking about the things she had done. She was trying not to think about the things she had killed. For 12 years, she had been a fighter pilot. She had flown Su-35 fighter jets for the Russian Air Force. She had completed many combat missions. She had shot down enemy aircraft. She had dropped bombs on buildings. She had fired missiles at targets. She had fought in the skies over Syria. She had fought in the skies over Ukraine. She had fought in places that many people do not even know about. She had also been shot at many times. Missiles had been fired at her. Anti-aircraft guns had tried to hit her. Enemy fighter pilots had tried to kill her. But she had survived. She was a skilled pilot. She was brave. She never panicked. She always found solutions to impossible problems. But 3 years ago, something changed inside her. She got tired of killing. She got tired of taking lives. She got tired of the weight of all the people she had killed. She applied for retirement. The Russian Air Force did not want to let her go, she was one of their best pilots. But Elena insisted. She said she could not do it anymore. So they let her go. She left the military. She left Russia. She traveled to different countries. She took a job as a consultant for a company that made flight simulation systems. She tried to be invisible. She tried to be a normal person. She tried to forget about her military past. Nobody knew who she really was. Nobody looked at her and thought, there is a former fighter pilot. She was just a woman in a gray sweater reading a book on a plane. The flight had been in the air for about an hour. Passengers were eating lunch or sleeping or watching movies on their personal screens. Everything was completely normal. Then, at 9:58 a.m., everything changed. There was a loud boom sound from the right side of the plane. It was not a small sound. It was a huge sound. It was the sound of metal breaking and something very important failing. The plane shook violently. People screamed. A woman's coffee cup flew out of her hands and spilled all over her neighbor's shirt. A child cried out in fear. An older man grabbed the armrest of his seat so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "What was that?" someone shouted. "Are we okay?" someone else screamed. The plane continued to shake. The overhead compartment started to open. Luggage began falling down onto passengers' heads. A young boy was hit by a falling suitcase. His mother grabbed him and held him tight. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus heard the sound immediately. He knew what it meant. An engine had failed. A big engine had failed. But he also knew that planes could fly with one engine. This was not necessarily a disaster. "What happened?" Sarah asked. Her voice was shaking. "Number 2 engine," Captain Marcus said. He was looking at the instrument panel. He was looking at the numbers and lights that told him what was happening to the plane. The number 2 engine has failed. But then he saw something else. The lights on his panel were telling him something worse. Much worse. "Wait," he said. "Wait. There is something else." More lights were turning red. More warnings were appearing. The electrical system was failing. The hydraulic systems were failing. The systems that controlled the plane were starting to fail, one by one, like dominoes falling in a line. "We have lost primary electrical power," Sarah said, reading from the instruments. "We have lost 2 of 3 hydraulic systems," Captain Marcus said. The plane was still climbing slightly, but it should not be. The engines should not be working like this. The system should not be failing this fast. This was not a simple engine failure. This was a cascade of failures. This was one system breaking and damaging other systems, which then damaged still other systems. "Captain, the number 2 engine is on fire," Sarah said, her voice very quiet. "I see it," Captain Marcus said. He was trying to think. He was trying to use all his experience, all his knowledge, all his skill. But he was beginning to understand something very important. Something that frightened him more than anything had ever frightened him before. "Contact the air traffic control," he said to Sarah. "Tell them we need to make an emergency descent." Sarah picked up the radio. "Denver Center, this is Flight 2847, she said. Her voice was steady, but inside, she was terrified. "We have had an engine failure and multiple system failures. We are requesting immediate descent to the nearest airport." "Flight 2847, understand," the controller said. "Nearest suitable airport is Denver. Distance approximately 140 miles. Descend to 20,000 feet and turn toward Denver." "Understand, Denver," Sarah said. Descending to 20,000 feet, turning toward Denver. But Captain Marcus was still looking at his instruments. He was still seeing more and more red lights. More and more systems failing. And he was beginning to understand that Denver Airport was too far away. The plane would not make it. The systems were failing too fast. "We are losing the backup hydraulic systems," Sarah said. "The landing gear will not lower," Captain Marcus said. "We are losing instrument power," Sarah said. Her voice was beginning to shake more. She was understanding it too. She was understanding that something very, very bad was happening. The plane was now flying on backup systems only. The backup systems were never designed to fly a big plane like this by themselves. The backup systems were meant to help in emergencies, to give pilots a few minutes to make a controlled descent and land. But the backup systems were not designed to fly for long periods of time. And they were not designed to keep a plane flying when there was this much damage. Captain Marcus tried to turn the plane toward Denver. But the plane did not respond the way it should respond. The controls were very sluggish, very slow. It was like trying to move a very heavy boulder with your bare hands. You could move it, but only very, very slowly. And it was very, very difficult. "We have maybe 12 to 15 minutes of backup power left," Sarah said. Captain Marcus looked at the navigation display. Denver was still 130 miles away. At the plane's current speed, it would take 25 minutes to get there. Even if the backup power lasted that long, which it would not, the plane would run out of power before reaching the airport. And even if they did reach the airport, the landing gear would not lower. The plane could not land without landing gear. A plane could not land on its belly. The plane would crash. Everyone would die. Captain Marcus understood. He understood that this was not a situation that could be solved. This was not a problem that he could overcome with his experience and skill. This was the end. He was going to die. All 241 passengers were going to die. All 12 crew members were going to die. Everyone on this plane was going to die, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. For a few seconds, Captain Marcus sat in silence. He was thinking about his wife at home. He was thinking about his children. He was thinking about all the things he would never do again. He would never hug his wife. He would never see his children again. He would never retire and travel around the world like he had planned. But he was also thinking about the passengers. He was thinking about all the people in the cabin who were scared and confused and did not know what was happening. He was thinking about the families who would lose their loved ones. He was thinking about the responsibility he had as a captain. And he made a decision. It was a decision that no captain wanted to make. It was a decision that violated every rule of captain training. But it was the right decision. He picked up the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is your captain speaking." The cabin became quiet. Everybody was waiting to hear what he would say. "We have experienced severe damage to our aircraft," Captain Marcus said. His voice was calm, but his heart was breaking. "We have lost multiple critical systems. Our backup systems are failing. I need to be honest with you about our situation." He paused. He took a breath. "I have been flying commercial aircraft for 23 years, he continued. I have handled engine failures, severe weather, hydraulic malfunctions, and many other emergencies. I have successfully solved every problem I have ever faced. But I want to tell you that this situation is different. People in the cabin were starting to cry. They could hear it in his voice. They could hear that he was telling them something bad. We do not have enough systems working to reach an airport, Captain Marcus said. We will not be able to land this plane safely. We have maybe 12 minutes of electrical power remaining. We are too far from any airport. Even if I could control this plane, which I cannot, because the control systems are failing, we would not be able to make it. The cabin erupted into screams. I am so very sorry, Captain Marcus said. I wish I had better news. I wish I could tell you that we are going to make it. But I will not lie to you. You deserve the truth. We are going to crash. We are going to die. A woman was crying hysterically. A man was holding his young daughter and saying, Daddy loves you. Daddy loves you so much. Use whatever time we have left however you need to use it, Captain Marcus said. Call your families if the phones work. Tell them that you love them. Say your prayers if that brings comfort. Tell the person next to you that you are sorry for anything you did wrong. Tell them goodbye. James Morrison, the lead flight attendant, felt his legs get weak. He sat down in a jump seat. He was thinking about his husband at home. He was thinking that he would never see his husband again. He would die on this plane. His body would be found in a crashed plane. His family would receive his body in a casket. In seat 17C, Elena heard the captain's words. She heard 241 people screaming. She heard parents holding children and crying. She heard the sound of absolute terror. But Elena did not panic. Elena did not scream. Elena stood up. Elena walked toward the front of the plane. Most people did not even notice her moving. They were too busy being terrified. They were too busy holding their loved ones and saying goodbye. But Elena was not going to sit and wait for death. Elena had faced death many times before. Elena had been in fighter jets that were on fire, with engines that were failing, with holes punched through the fuselage by enemy bullets. And she had survived. She had survived because she had refused to accept that death was inevitable. She had survived because she had thought of unconventional solutions. She reached the cockpit door. She knocked. Not a scared knock. Not a desperate knock. A firm, confident knock. James Morrison heard it. He could not believe it. Who was knocking on the cockpit door? Everyone should be saying goodbye, not knocking on doors. He pressed the button to talk to whoever was at the door. What do you need? He asked. I am a former fighter pilot, Elena said into the microphone. Her voice was calm. Her voice was confident. Her voice sounded like someone who had control of the situation. I have survived situations worse than this. I have flown damaged aircraft. I have experience with emergency procedures. Open this door and let me help you. Or you will all die anyway. What do you have to lose? James did not know what to do. Was this woman telling the truth? Or was she crazy? He went to Captain Marcus. Captain, there is a woman here, James said. She says she is a former fighter pilot. She says she can help. Captain Marcus looked at First Officer Sarah Chin. Sarah looked back at him. They had nothing to lose. They were already dead. If this woman could help, then maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Captain Marcus pressed the button to unlock the cockpit door. Come in, he said. Elena opened the door and stepped into the cockpit. The cockpit smelled like burning electrical systems. The cockpit smelled like fear. There were red lights everywhere on the instrument panel. Warnings were flashing. Alarms were sounding. But Elena did not panic. Elena had seen much worse. She looked at Captain Marcus. What is your control authority? She asked. Maybe 15%, Captain Marcus said. We have backup mechanical systems only. The hydraulic systems are mostly gone. Okay, Elena said. She was thinking like a military pilot now. Show me. Captain Marcus moved the control stick. The plane responded, but only barely. The nose moved slightly. The plane turned very slowly. That is less than what I thought, Elena said. But I have flown with less. What about fuel? 42,000 pounds, Sarah said. Dump it, Elena said. What? Captain Marcus said. We cannot dump fuel. It is illegal. It harms the environment. We will have problems with the FAA and the airline. The airline will have much bigger problems if 241 people die, Elena said. Dump the fuel. Right now, immediately. Captain Marcus understood. Elena was right. He reached for the fuel dump switches and turned them on. Suddenly, thousands of pounds of jet fuel started pouring out of the wings of the plane. It created a white cloud behind them as they continued to fall through the sky. While that fuel is being dumped, Elena said, I need to tell you something. We cannot land this plane the normal way. Normal procedures will not work. Commercial training will not help us. We need to use military procedures. Military procedures are unconventional. Military procedures are dangerous. But they work when nothing else works. Elena explained her plan in a calm, clear voice. She told Captain Marcus and Sarah exactly what they would need to do. She explained the forward slip maneuver. She explained the tactical descent. She explained the tactical overhead brake. She explained the hard landing. Everything I am telling you to do, Elena said, violates your training. Everything I am telling you to do violates FAA regulations. Everything I am telling you to do sounds impossible. But I have done all of these things many times in my fighter jet. And I have survived every time. How is this possible? Sarah asked. A Boeing 777 cannot do these things. The aircraft is not designed for these kinds of maneuvers. You are correct, Elena said. A Boeing 777 is not designed for these things. But neither was my Su-35 when I flew it with an engine on fire and hydraulics failing and half my wing damaged by anti-aircraft fire. I flew it anyway. Because the alternative was dying. And I have always been too stubborn to accept death. She pointed at the navigation display. Peterson Air Force Base is 80 miles away, she said. That is our destination. They have a long runway. They will have emergency equipment. They will understand unconventional approaches because they work with military aircraft. This is where we will land. Captain Marcus nodded slowly. I am ready, he said. Tell me what to do. First, we need to get down to a lower altitude, Elena said. We need to descend fast. We are going to use a maneuver called a forward slip. I am going to tell you exactly what to do, and you are going to do it exactly as I say it. Elena watched the fuel gauges. The fuel is down to 8,000 pounds, she said. That is enough. Now, Captain Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. You are going to bank this aircraft to 30 degrees. You are going to point the nose down 10 degrees. You are going to apply opposite rudder. You are going to create a configuration that feels completely wrong. Your training will tell you not to do this. Do it anyway. Captain Marcus took a deep breath. He pushed the control stick to the right and down. He pushed the left rudder pedal. The plane tilted at an angle that no commercial pilot would ever use. In the cabin, passengers screamed. They were being pushed sideways in their seats. The world was tilting. The horizon was tilting. Through the windows, they could see the landscape below them, but it was rotating. The plane was falling, but it was falling at an angle. Perfect, Elena said. Maintain this configuration. Keep the descent rate at 4,000 feet per minute. You are doing perfectly. Elena picked up the public address microphone. This is Major Elena Valkov, she said to the passengers. I am a former fighter pilot. I am in the cockpit helping your captain. The aircraft is going to make movements that feel violent and wrong. This is intentional. Everything is under control. Stay calm. We are going to make it. The screaming in the cabin stopped. The terror was still there, but there was something else now. There was hope. There was the sound of someone who actually knew what they were doing. The plane descended rapidly. 25,000 feet. 20,000 feet. 15,000 feet. The descent rate was 4,000 feet per minute. Start to level out, Elena said. Slowly. Reduce the bank angle gradually. Captain Marcus began to bring the wings level. The plane was still descending, but the angle was becoming less extreme. Good, Elena said. Continue. Slowly. Smooth movements. You are almost there. At 12,000 feet, the plane was level again. The descent rate had reduced to a manageable level. Excellent, Elena said. You have just executed the most dangerous descent in commercial aviation history, and you did it perfectly. Elena contacted Peterson Air Force Base. Peterson Air Force Base, she said into the radio, this is Flight 2847. We are a civilian Boeing 777 with catastrophic system failures. We are requesting emergency landing. I am a former military pilot assisting with this emergency. All other traffic should be cleared. Emergency equipment should be positioned. We are inbound. Flight 2847, we copy your message, the controller said. All traffic is cleared. Emergency vehicles are standing by. You are cleared for emergency approach to runway 13. Understand, Peterson, Elena said. We will be conducting a tactical approach. This will not be a normal landing procedure. Understood, Flight 2847, the controller said. We are standing by for anything you need. Now the plane was 40 miles from Peterson. Elena explained the final part of her plan. We are going to approach the runway from above, very high and very fast, she said. We are going to make a hard left turn. We are going to spiral down very quickly. Then we are going to roll out on final approach and land. The landing is going to be hard. But hard landings are survivable. No landings are not survivable. Understood, Captain Marcus said. Elena watched the distance to Peterson decrease. 30 miles. 20 miles. 10 miles. There is the runway, Elena said, pointing. Peterson Air Force Base appeared in the distance. The runway was visible. It was a long runway, 13,500 feet long. That was long enough for what they needed to do. Begin your turn now, Elena said to Captain Marcus. Hard left turn. Bank as much as you can with your degraded controls. Point the nose down 15 degrees. Begin the spiral descent. Now. Captain Marcus banked the plane hard to the left. The whole world tilted sideways. Through the windows, passengers could see the runway below them, rotating as the plane spiraled downward. The descent rate climbed to 3,000 feet per minute. The plane was falling, spiraling like a leaf falling from a tree, but in a controlled way. Tighter, Elena said. More bank. We need to descend faster. Captain Marcus increased the bank angle. The spiral became tighter. Passengers were pressed into their seats from the force of the turn. 4,000 feet, Elena called out. Keep turning. 3,000 feet, she said. Okay, start to roll out, Elena commanded. Gradually reduce the bank angle. Bring the nose up slowly. Captain Marcus began to roll the wings level. The spiral was becoming less extreme. The turn was becoming less tight. 1,500 feet, Elena said. You are doing perfectly. 1,000 feet. Continue rolling out. 500 feet. Almost there. The plane was now level, aligned with the runway. The speed was 240 knots. The descent rate was 500 feet per minute. The runway was directly ahead, rushing toward them. Do not try to flare, Elena said firmly. Do not pull back on the control stick. Fly straight into the runway. Let the landing gear absorb the impact. This is your margin. Trust it. Captain Marcus wanted to pull back. Every instinct, every lesson, every piece of training told him to pull back. But he did not pull back. He kept the plane level and flew straight toward the runway. The main landing gear hit the runway with tremendous force. The impact was so hard that the entire plane shook violently. Overhead compartments burst open. Luggage flew through the cabin. Passengers were thrown against their seatbelts. But the plane did not break. The landing gear held. The plane was on the ground. The nose gear came down and hit hard. Captain Marcus immediately deployed the thrust reversers on the remaining engine. He pushed the brake pedals as hard as he could. The wheels locked and started to smoke from the heat of friction. The plane was traveling at 200 knots, then 150, then 100, then 50 knots. Finally, the plane stopped. There was 3,000 feet of runway left. For a moment, there was silence in the cockpit. No alarms. No warning sounds. Just the hissing of hydraulic fluid and the creaking of the plane settling. Then Captain Marcus started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh, exactly. It was the laugh of someone who had been absolutely certain he was going to die, and then discovered that he was still alive. He was laughing because he could not believe it. He was laughing because it seemed impossible. First Officer Sarah Chen was crying. She was crying with relief. She was crying because she was alive. She was 29 years old and she was going to live to see 30. She was going to continue her life. She was going to become a better pilot. She was going to have a career and perhaps a family. Elena picked up the public address microphone. We are on the ground, she said. We are safe. Emergency slides will deploy in 15 seconds. Exit the aircraft quickly but carefully. You have all survived something that should have been impossible. Be proud of yourselves. Outside the plane, foam trucks were spraying foam on the burning engine. Emergency vehicles were surrounding the plane. Paramedics were standing by. Air Force personnel were ready to help. One by one, passengers began to exit the plane using the emergency slides. Flight attendants were helping them down. Everyone was shaking. Everyone was crying. Everyone was alive. All 241 passengers, all 12 crew members. Everyone was alive. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus looked at Elena with tears streaming down his face. Who are you? He asked. Who are you really? Elena took off her headset. My name is Elena Valkov, she said. I was a major in the Russian Air Force. I flew Su-35 fighter jets for 12 years. I flew combat missions in Syria, in Ukraine, in places that do not exist officially. I was shot at by missiles. I had engines on fire. I had sections of my wings shot away by anti-aircraft fire. I survived everything because I learned to think unconventionally. Captain Marcus stared at her. I retired 18 months ago, Elena continued. I did not want to kill people anymore. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be a regular person. But today, I could not be invisible. I could not sit and watch 241 people die when I had the skill to save them. The next day, the news was everywhere. The story was on every television station. News helicopters were flying over Peterson Air Force Base. Cameras were recording the foam-covered Boeing 777 sitting on the runway with its right engine completely destroyed. Videos of the spiral descent, taken by Peterson's tower cameras, were being shown again and again. Aviation experts were arguing about whether Elena's methods were brilliant or insane. Some people said she was a hero. Some people said she was reckless. Within hours, news reporters had discovered Elena's military background. They learned that she was a Russian fighter pilot. They started calling her a hero. They started asking her for interviews. Elena did not want the attention. She wanted to go back to being invisible. But she could not do that anymore. Her identity was public. Her face was in newspapers and on television. People recognized her on the street. The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, began their investigation. Thomas Crawford was the lead investigator. He interviewed Elena, Captain Marcus, and First Officer Sarah Chen. He asked them to explain every decision that was made. He asked them to explain every maneuver. He asked them why they violated regulations. Your methods violated multiple FAA regulations, Crawford said to Elena. Fuel dumping without clearance, maneuvering outside the certified flight envelope. An approach that violated maximum descent rates. Normally, this would result in prosecution. Elena looked Crawford straight in the eyes. Under normal circumstances, 241 people would be dead, she said. You would be investigating a smoking crater instead of sitting here talking to survivors. Yes, I violated regulations. Those regulations assume that normal procedures work. They do not account for situations where normal procedures have already failed and death is the only alternative. Crawford listened. Then he smiled. I flew F-4 Phantom fighter jets in Vietnam, he said. I know exactly what you did. You did not violate those regulations recklessly. You violated them because it was the only way to save lives. You have my respect. The survivors of Flight 2847 created a survivors group. They met regularly. They talked about what happened. They talked about how close they came to dying. They talked about Elena and how she saved them. They decided to create a scholarship fund in Elena's name. This fund would give money to young women who wanted to become pilots. They wanted to inspire the next generation of pilots. The fund raised over $200,000 in the first month. Young women from all over the country applied for scholarships. Some of them said that Elena's story inspired them to become pilots. 8 months after the emergency landing, the NTSB released their official report. The report said that Captain Marcus had been correct, normal procedures could not have saved the plane. The report said that Elena's methods, while unconventional, had unquestionably saved 241 lives. But the report also said something important. It said that Elena's methods required special skills that most commercial pilots do not have. It said that you cannot teach everyone to be like Elena. It said that military and civilian aviation have different approaches, and both approaches are necessary. The FAA decided not to punish Captain Marcus or First Officer Sarah Chen. The FAA said they had made the right decision by trusting Elena when they had no other choice. The FAA also created a special panel to study Elena's methods and consider how civilian pilots might learn some basic concepts from military flying. 2 years after the emergency landing, Elena attended the survivors' annual meeting. The meeting was held in a hotel ballroom in Denver. It was no longer about remembering near death. It was about celebrating survival and life. Children who had been on Flight 2847 were now old enough to understand what had happened. They wanted to meet Elena. They wanted to thank her. Some of them wanted to hug her. Elena was standing on a hotel balcony overlooking Denver. She was looking at aircraft approaching the distant airport, with landing lights cutting through the darkness. Captain Marcus joined her. They stood together in silence. They did not need to speak. They had shared something that connected them forever. They had been moments away from death together. They had experienced the specific terror of knowing you were going to die. They had experienced the specific wonder of discovering you were still alive. Finally, Marcus asked, "Do you regret it? Walking into that cockpit? Revealing who you were? Everything that followed?" Elena thought about the question carefully. She thought about losing her privacy. She thought about people knowing her name. She thought about never being able to be invisible again. But then she thought about 241 people who were alive. She thought about children who would grow up. She thought about families that were still together. She thought about all the love and laughter and ordinary moments that would not have happened if she had stayed silent. "No," she said finally. "I do not regret it. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that aviation training does not teach the skills that could save lives in extreme emergencies. But I do not regret saving you. You changed how I think about being a captain," Marcus said. "You taught me that sometimes survival requires unconventional thinking. You taught me that procedures are tools for normal situations, but that abnormal situations might require abnormal responses. That is the most important lesson," Elena said. "That is what I hope people understand. Not that I was a hero. But that sometimes survival requires refusing to accept death as inevitable. Sometimes you have to do things that scare you. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and throw away the rulebook." They stood together watching aircraft descend toward runway lights. Each approach was a small miracle of engineering and training and human skill. Each landing was a testament to the procedures and standards that made commercial aviation extraordinarily safe for millions of people. But they both knew that somewhere, sometime, another aircraft would face catastrophic failures. Another pilot would need to think unconventionally. Another person would need to refuse to accept impossible as final. And maybe, just maybe, that person would remember the story of Flight 2847. Maybe they would remember that sometimes, the most important skill is the willingness to think beyond your training when everything else has failed. The story of Major Elena Valkov and Flight 2847 became famous in aviation circles. It was studied in pilot training programs. It was debated in safety meetings. It was referenced in books about aviation emergencies. Elena eventually accepted a position as a consultant with a company that developed advanced flight simulation systems. This job allowed her to contribute her expertise without being in the public eye constantly. She worked behind the scenes, helping to develop training programs that would help pilots think more creatively about emergency situations. Sometimes, when Elena flew on commercial planes as a passenger, people would recognize her. Some would thank her. Some would ask for her autograph. Some would ask to take photographs with her. Elena was never comfortable with the attention, but she accepted it as the price of saving 241 lives. She had learned that you cannot save lives and stay invisible. She had learned that doing the right thing sometimes means losing your privacy. But she had also learned that saving lives was worth that price. Captain Marcus continued to fly commercial aircraft. Every time he walked through his pre-flight checks, he thought about that day. He thought about how close he had come to dying. He thought about how Elena had walked into his cockpit and refused to accept death. He became a better pilot because of that experience. He became more creative in his thinking. He became more willing to consider unconventional solutions when conventional solutions were not working. He became the kind of captain who thought about safety not just in terms of following procedures, but in terms of being prepared for situations that exceeded procedures. First Officer Sarah Chen also continued to fly. She had learned from Elena that being a good pilot meant more than just following the rulebook. It meant being prepared to adapt when circumstances demanded adaptation. It meant trusting your training while also being willing to go beyond your training when necessary. The 241 passengers who survived Flight 2847 never forgot what happened. Some of them became aviation enthusiasts. Some of them started flying more because they realized how safe aviation actually is. Some of them became afraid of flying and avoided it. But all of them carried the story with them for the rest of their lives. In the years that followed, there were other aviation emergencies. In some of these emergencies, pilots remembered the story of Flight 2847. They remembered that unconventional thinking had saved 241 lives. And some of them, when facing situations where normal procedures were not working, thought about what Elena would have done. They thought about her refusal to accept death as inevitable. And sometimes, that creative thinking saved lives again. The sky continues to be filled with aircraft every day. Millions of people fly safely to their destinations. Most journeys are routine and peaceful. Most landings are smooth and perfect. Most people never think about the pilots or the training or the incredible skill and systems that make flying so safe. But somewhere in the sky, sometime, there will be another emergency. There will be another situation that exceeds what normal procedures can handle. There will be another pilot who has to decide whether to accept death or to fight for survival with unconventional methods. And at that moment, maybe someone will think about Elena. Maybe someone will remember that impossible often just means nobody has tried the right unconventional solution yet. Because that is the real legacy of Flight 2847. It is not that Elena was a superhero. It is that when everything seems impossible, you do not give up. You do not accept defeat. You find another way. You think differently. You act differently. You refuse to accept that death is inevitable. And sometimes, if you are brave enough and skilled enough and stubborn enough, you survive. And 241 other people survive with you. That is the power of refusing to accept impossible. That is what Major Elena Valkov taught the world. And that is a lesson that will echo through the skies for generations to come.